Welcome to today's explainer. We're going to empower you to completely transform your integrative literature reviews. We are taking them from simple, surface-level summaries and turning them into cohesive, analytical syntheses that actually advance knowledge. Because let's face it, nobody wants to read a giant, monotonous list of what other people wrote, and you certainly don't want to be the one stuck writing it. So you are in the exact right place.
Okay, let's dive right into the roadmap. We're going to go from the descriptive trap and theoretical lenses right through framing variables, the constant comparative method, the synthesis matrix, and finally, writing the big so what. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Section 1, breaking the cycle of summaries and avoiding that infamous descriptive trap.
Look, we've got to call out the single most common and frankly, the most frustrating error in literature reviews, falling headfirst into the descriptive trap. Be honest with yourself here. Does your current draft read kind of like a sprawling book report? You know, paragraph after paragraph of author A found X and then author B found Y? Yeah, if so, you're stuck in the trap. It's literally like being trapped at a dinner party where someone just lists off events without ever telling you why any of it actually matters.
So what's the fix? Well, it's a simple but profound shift. A descriptive summary is all about the what. It just regurgitates existing info. But an analytical synthesis, that focuses on the how and the why. You've got to stop just reporting what's out there and start actively making meaning to push your theoretical framework forward.
Which brings us to Section 2, the theoretical lens, or bringing philosophy into your synthesis.
To actually pull off that shift, we need to look at the philosophical why. Under a subjectivist epistemology, the knowledge you're generating isn't just some cold, indisputable fact. It's a value-laden interpretation. This is huge because it literally gives you permission to have a voice. You aren't just a neutral reporter holding a microphone. You're an active, critical interpreter, challenging the status quo.
Think about it like this. When you embrace relativism, the idea that reality is socially constructed, you're actually welcoming diverse, even completely conflicting perspectives into your review. This philosophical stance forces your analytical voice out of hiding. It completely shifts your writing from a bland summary into a critical, voice-driven analysis, a real game changer.
Moving on to Section 3, framing the variables and operationalizing your purpose.
You know, getting really clear on your purpose right out of the gate is exactly what stops you from extracting a massive, messy list of variables later. Structural templates like P-codes or Spider are absolutely your best defense against data overload here. By using these frameworks, you're drawing your exact boundaries before you even run your very first search. You're defining your population, the phenomenon of interest, your outcomes, and that is exactly how you separate the crucial data from the extraneous fluff.
Setting up these boundaries early is an absolute prerequisite for analytical rigor. You've got to explicitly justify your sampling frame and route every single inclusion and exclusion decision straight back to your theoretical framework. Doing this up front, it's going to save you from drowning in literature that might be incredibly interesting, but it's completely irrelevant to your specific research question.
All right, Section 4, the constant comparative method, where we get into the rigorous analysis.
So, boundaries are set, but how do we actually analyze all this data without just lazily grouping it into basic themes? Enter the constant comparative method, or CCM. This method is incredibly effective because it forces you to move from low-level description all the way up to high-level abstraction through 4 very deliberate steps. You reduce the data, display it, compare it iteratively, and then draw your conclusions. It systematically stops you from just throwing out data because it doesn't fit a neat little pre-existing theme. And this is vital because an integrative review is a mashup of so many different kinds of studies. CCM makes sure that every single data point, whether that's a quantitative statistical effect size, giving you the what, or a qualitative theme giving you the how, gets systematically compared. That's how you build a truly holistic, unified narrative.
Next up, Section 5, the synthesis matrix. This is how we eliminate that descriptive overload.
If you're looking for a tangible tool to force your brain into analytical gear, the synthesis matrix is the ultimate antidote. Seriously, for so many researchers, this is the big aha moment. You set up your columns as the studies, say Hopia or Whittemore, and your rows as the variables. The real secret? You write horizontally across the rows. You synthesize the variable conceptually across the different authors, rather than just writing an isolated paragraph about a study from 2016 and then another one about 2005.
But it does something else that's visually super powerful. If you see an empty cell in your matrix, that is a blaring neon sign pointing directly to a knowledge gap. By mapping out the evidence landscape like this, you instantly spot the contradictions, the consensus, and exactly where you can justify the need for your own new research.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, writing the so what and translating that matrix into actual prose.
This is where the rubber meets the road. We have to take those matrix rows and shift from just saying, here's what happened, to explaining so what. Instead of typing out boring sequences like Smith found X and Jones found Y, expert reviewers use evaluative language. They'll write things like, the evidence for Z is mixed, with some studies indicating A while others point to B. See what that does? It weighs the evidence and actively guides the reader through the conversation happening between these sources.
Now, you might be wondering, how do I assert my voice while keeping things academically objective? First, avoid saying I think. Instead, use specific language strategies. Drop in attitude markers or boosters like significantly, or use hedges like it appears to demonstrate. These phrases subtly signal your critical appraisal of the literature and tether those findings right back to your theoretical premise.
When you go to structure those exact paragraphs, I cannot recommend the PEL framework enough. That's point, evidence, evaluation, and link. Applying this specific framework guarantees that every single paragraph in your review isn't just a summary, but inherently answers that big so what question, linking it all back to your main argument.
Of course, to get the right raw materials for those paragraphs, keep the PQRS system in mind during your reading phase. Preview, question, read, summarize. Using this ensures you are constantly questioning an article's relevance, keeping you laser-focused so you don't wander off on interesting but ultimately unhelpful tangents.
Remember, a huge chunk of your analysis is properly weighting the evidence. Your quality appraisal isn't just some administrative hurdle, it's highly strategic. You want to use fit-for-purpose tools, like the MMAT or CASP, to position the high-rigor studies as the core of your argument, while using lower-rigor studies as preliminary evidence. And absolutely layer in gray literature. Think policy documents or spoken-word sources to build out a much richer, real-world context around the clinical data.
Throughout this whole iterative process, you've got to hold on to what we call the golden thread. That means constantly pausing to summarize your findings as you write, ensuring that every single choice, from your initial search parameters to your final concluding paragraph, ties seamlessly back to your ontological foundations and your core variables.
Because at the end of the day, a rigorous integrative review doesn't just summarize what everyone else has already done. It's an original contribution to science. It provides a comprehensive picture of a complex phenomenon that is so much greater than the sum of its parts. By mastering these analytical synthesis strategies, you aren't just reporting on the conversation anymore, you are actively leading it. So what new narrative is your research going to uncover?